Next on the agenda is Justin to approve the Arizona 2012 SCIP, the Strategic Communication Interoperability Plan.
I will just say that normally we have action items in front of the agenda, but that was not logical here. It's got all of that background. There was work on this action item. It's going to be a lot shorter. Kate has written everything you just heard about our status, so we can adjust.
Thank you. For you, going through the SCIP, I do have a couple of copies of the SCIP up here, but considering it's about 200 pages, I wasn't about 50 copies. Of course, it is electronically available, and we do have a number of different change documentation that are available to kind of help walk you through this. Just to provide a little bit of background, the SCIP process, the Statewide Communications Interoperability Plan, was born out of the 2007 PSCC grant program. This was a requirement in order to get grant funding in 2007, was that every state had to have a SCIP. And the Office of Emergency Communications came out with a whole list of requirements of all the different things that had to be in a SCIP, your documentation, methodology, that type of stuff. So the state of Arizona first drafted a SCIP in 2007, submitted it to the Office of Emergency Communications that November, and it was approved. And since then, actually since about 2009, we have been reviewing the SCIP annually and updating it annually. Our current version was approved last April. This year's update, we initially wanted to focus on developing out more comprehensive action plans for some of our key strategic initiatives, and kind of streamline the SCIP a little bit more, because we do recognize that that's a really thick binder, really thick book, and once you start getting plans that are that in-depth and detailed in terms of everything's in it, from the geography of Arizona, our population, number of tribes, etc., all of a sudden it becomes a document that nobody ever reads, and then at what point do you have it? Then in February, along comes HR 3630 and the National Public Safety Broadband Network. We had anticipated in the last year that broadband would have an increase significant, and so we had added a few tweaks last year to recognize broadband coming down the pipe. But then when this bill was passed, all of a sudden that kind of changed a lot of our strategic thinking. And then in May, we held the SCIP implementation workshop, and got a lot of feedback from folks. And we actually, during that SCIP workshop, went through each of the initiatives and got feedback on terms of what's working, what's not working. Then, and so those were kind of some of the key focuses for the SCIP revision. Obviously, we went through, reviewed the whole thing, SCIP, every word for accuracy, currency, relevance, updating the status, those types of things. Then in June, at the National Next Week meeting, OEC announced that they are going to be unveiling a new strategic plan template. The more modern, the National Emergency Communications Plan. This template would be called the Statewide Emergency Communications Plan. And this is their effort to replace the SCIP. Primarily with the goal of recognizing that the SCIP template is rather wielded. Many states across the country formulated their SCIPs in 2007, and it has not been touched or looked at since then. Even when they've completely changed direction on where they're going, their SCIP is still what the SCIP is. Every year we report to the Fed on the status of our SCIP initiatives, and one of the things they want to do is to make it easier for the plans to be able to track the plans, to keep them up to date, so that every state is kind of doing what we're doing it annually, but really condense it down more so that all of that in-depth information that we have on our SCIP most likely will no longer be a requirement within the PSCC. We have not seen the new template yet, but we do expect that this new template will expand out beyond just interoperability and encompass kind of the full life cycle of emergency communications, whether it's alerting systems, next generation 911, broadband, just kind of that whole convergence of emergency communication. We expect that sometime before the end of this year, the template will be rolled out. It has to go through their federal approval processes. Anytime you have a form on the Fed side, they have to get Paperwork Reduction Act approval. That's probably going to take some time. Their target is to have this new version, the PSCC, be due to OEC by the end of next year. With that, we decided to scale back a little bit what we were doing in the SCIP revision this year, primarily because if the whole process is going to change next year, we didn't want to have to go redo, tear out a bunch of stuff, and then put some stuff back in, or vice versa. So we scaled back a little bit of what we were planning on doing with the SCIP revision this year, and instead kind of focused on these four areas based on all the feedback that we got, some of the other changes, and just general status updates. One is a number of changes related to developing a public safety broadband strategy, increasing the support for regional planning efforts. Some of these changes are minor, but these were comments that we were hearing. We want to have more in-depth regional planning, particularly at a strategic level, not just at the tactical level. Both AIRS and the STR, those projects being complete, we needed to change those initiatives to reflect the fact that their build-outs were complete. Now we need to move into that sustainability. And then also a bunch of other kind of status updates and non-significant kind of items. The fact that the Government Information Technology Agency doesn't exist now, or DOA, different reference updates and things like that. So some of the other types of changes that we had wanted to make into the SCIP, we decided to postpone and hold off on doing those until we get this new template from the Fed. For incorporating the public safety broadband network, I want to go first through kind of the strategic initiatives and objectives and the changes that we made. In your packets, you should have what we call our CISO chart. These are the 12 strategic initiatives and their supporting objectives. In red are the language that we added in this year, and there's a couple of words that were crossed out throughout there, so I'll go through those right now. This is kind of the core section of our SCIP, or section 5, the strategy section. So that's why I wanted to talk about these first, but we'll go through the other section. But to incorporate the development of public safety broadband, quite simply, as well as kind of other aspects that are voice or data related, we added the terms voice and data to 3 strategic initiatives. Number 1, dealing with governance. Number 6, regional systems. And Initiative 9, communication systems for state agencies. By adding it to these 3 this year, it allows to, 1, begin all of the governance discussions that we're going to have to do. You know, regardless of whether we build it or First Step builds it, there's still going to have to be an Arizona governance structure to deal with the build-out and then eventually the operations of the broadband network. Then on strategic objectives 12.13 down under outreach, specifically call out broadband as one of our outreach initiatives. That initiative was the National Interop Channels Plan, and instead now it's adding public safety broadband, and Susan will talk about that kind of shift during the outreach plan discussion a little bit later. For strategic regional planning effort, added the words strategic to objective 2.2, and then also changed the primary owner on strategic initiatives 2 and 5 to be the regional partners. One of the key elements of the SCIP is that the SCIP is a statewide strategy for all of us, not just the PSCC office or ADOA or DPS, but for all public safety agencies in Arizona. And strategic initiative 2 is really about developing regional governance structures. And we wanted to emphasize that it is the region's responsibility to develop their own structures. And this also helps that, when Pinal County puts in for a grant, and I'm just using this as an example, but when they put in for a grant application, they can specifically reference objectives 2.2. Say, we're the ones responsible for regional governance in this area, and we need funding to do X, Y, and Z, and the SCIP will now support that effort. And then again on Initiative 5 with AIRS, now that we're moving from the build-out phase to the sustainment phase, any further improvements or enhancements to the air systems is really going to need to be done at the regional level and not at the statewide level. So that the change there is made to reflect that. And then of course the other changes for AIRS and SDR, the key elements for the SDR is changing it from implement the strategic technology reserve to sustain the SDR. On objective 5.2 under AIRS, for the last several years, we had an objective called creating next generation AIRS plan. And that was always kind of a placeholder initiative. And it was, what's the future of AIRS after we build out the 35 existing sites that we had planned? Over the last several months, conversations with DPS and SIEC, and a recognition of the fact that the funding levels aren't what they were in 2007 and 2009. We have come up with a plan that the SIEC will be looking at their next meeting next month on allowing local jurisdictions to identify coverage gaps in their areas, identify resources, and build kind of a regionalized support model and approach, because for AIRS to work, all the other agencies in that area also have to support the idea of expanding AIRS in that area. Then bringing that before the SIEC for approval and to DPS for technical approval, and then getting that asset tied into the AIRS system formula. And that will be called our AIRS Improvement and Sustainability Plan. So we had an AIRS Improvement, Resiliency, and Sustainability Plan, but the AIRS is just a little confused. So now we're replacing next generation plan with the more formal title of that plan. We also lowered the priority of each of those from a high priority to a medium priority in recognition of some of the comments we got at the last meeting of the PSCC. The fact that those build-ups are now complete and we have other higher priorities now. So we want to continue to sustain those, and the completion date, or excuse me, I should say the term date, because all of our initiatives have a term end, is now 2015 for the SDR, which was, I believe, 2011 initially. So with that, first wanted to provide an opportunity and make sure the volume is on the phone as well for commissioners on the phone. Wanted to open it up for any questions or discussion on the proposed strategic initiative objectives before we get into the other changes. Ms. Laura?
Yes, I know that in the technology section we're addressing equipment, those kinds of things there. We're getting to the data world. We don't address anything in software. Software can kind of go to that, become an interoperability issue, and start building data systems out. So that's always something we want in the future.
That's a good point, and I think that may be an area where we may have to further define what I think we all know what we mean by voice, but further define what we mean by the term data. Coming from former Kita, the IT realm, when I hear data, my natural first instinct is actually the software versus hardware kind of a thing. But in those terms, you have to have both. You can't just have hardware, you got to have software to begin with.
Yeah, my example would be like, spider connection times, you're looking up all these EOCs, and everybody would have to say web EOC or something compatible. You aren't able to share that information, even though that infrastructure.
Anyone on the phone?
Yes, I'm here. This is Dave Bunce.
I'm here, Jeff Rayner.
Yeah, Tom Aleenan.
Thank you. Maldonado.
Thank you. So, with that, I'll move into the kind of the section-by-section changes. At a high level, there are 7 sections to the initiative: an introduction section, the methodology that kind of talks about how the skip was developed, that, points of contact, the initial participating agencies. Section 4 is our current statewide assessment, where we document where everything stands in the state along the 5 lanes of the state-com continuum: governance, SOPs, technology, training and exercise, usage and outreach. And then 5, the strategy section, where we lay out our vision, mission, goals, all of these strategic initiatives, the objectives, the action plans, timelines, funding sources, that type of thing. And then the closing and appendices section. In sections 1 and 2, there were really no significant changes. We did update the tribal names. Section 2 there, we just corrected them. Section 3, again, no significant changes there. That section most likely is one of the ones that will probably go away with the new format, the methodology of how the document was created, etc. In section 4, it's laid out across all 5 lanes of the continuum, so I'm going to go through. We did make a number of changes throughout section 4. In the governance section, we updated the graphics to make it a little bit more legible and accurately reflect the governance here in Arizona. We updated the key priorities of the PSCC office. Every year we update our office plan after we update the SCIP. And we made some changes last year in our office plan in terms of how we're going to allocate resources, so we updated that as well. Added in an MCU work group and the public safety broadband work group, a list of different work groups there. Under SOPs, we updated description of the interoperability plan, added in our new COML, or communications unit related procedures. In technology, we updated the status of the project. Training and exercise, we again lots of work in the communications training field or section over the last year, so we updated all of that. And the list of just general statewide training and exercise activities recently. We don't really go in depth. There's an awful lot more trainings and exercises that happen, but we don't keep those documented and skip every year because we don't really think that's going to be too useful. And again, I think this is one of the areas we're likely to see scaled back. In the usage and outreach section, we kind of expanded out just the introduction paragraph there and added in more of our NECP Goal 2 information references. In section 5, again, this is our strategy section that really lays out kind of where we're going statewide on interoperable communication. Some of the key changes that were made, obviously all the initiatives or changes we recommended here on the strategic initiatives and objectives, we had to make a number of changes throughout the initiatives to conform to those. We also updated the funding sources, primarily the fact that the PSCC grant program is now ended. IECGP is kind of going away. All the PSCC grants are now wrapped up. So in a number of initiatives, we had to remove PSCC grants. The Slate B grant is on the horizon, so we added that in. We updated one of the recommendations from the SCIP implementation workshop was specifically Strategic Initiative 6, the ones dealing with implementing regional systems. And there wasn't a change in the initiative itself, but it was a change in how that initiative was described. That is, Arizona has identified the linking of regional systems with one another and with state systems as the means to facilitate interoperability statewide. And it used to say primary mechanism. And the concern that was expressed during the workshop was that by talking about the primary mechanism,
There may be policy makers, decision makers, and stakeholders that view that it's our intent that all 200 different radio systems in Arizona at some point link directly with each other, and anyone on TRWC will be able to talk to anyone up on the Colorado Plateau and view them all simultaneously across all these different systems. And really, that's not the intent of this initiative. This initiative is intended to allow folks to use lots of different methods, whether it's like the RCSC project, where it's a tactical channel that these different systems can all link to each other, or if it's a project like YRCS, ADOT, and TTS, all having a connection through communication CCGWs, or the RICO project. So this was kind of to help further downplay that, or I shouldn't say downplay, but to clarify, thank you, that initiative. And to make sure that, we weren't leaving people out. And of course, the updates to the outreach plan. We also made a whole bunch of changes to the appendixes, minor changes, just to kind of conform to everything else. So with that, we're getting close. Are there any, before we go to approve, are there any other questions or discussion on the changes that are being proposed today?
Justin, I just want to thank you and the team for doing this and for making it very easy for us to understand. It takes a lot of work to do that. Any other questions? If not, I would take a motion to approve the new 2012 skip. Second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.